My name is Sunita, and I belong to a middle-class family. I'm quite educated. As soon as I completed my studies, my parents started looking for a match for me. A proposal came for me from a boy named Gaurav. With the consent of both families, we got married, and I moved to my in-laws' house. At my in-laws' house, besides my husband, there was his sister-in-law living with us. My husband's parents had passed away many years ago. My sister-in-law, Parul, was a widow and had no one else in this world, so she stayed in her in-laws' house. She had no children, and her husband had passed away at a young age, leaving her a widow in the prime of her life. One day, I went to my sister-in-law's room and started talking to her. She was a very kind and cultured woman, deeply devoted to God. She had taken great care of her brother-in-law. I didn't know much about what she had been through before, but I found her to be a genuinely good person. I started visiting her room daily to talk to her. While chatting one day, I began massaging her legs, and after some time, she fell asleep. I then went to the kitchen and prepared tea for her, bringing it to her room. After finishing all the kitchen work, I ironed her clothes and neatly arranged them in her wardrobe. By the time I reached my room, it was already 11 p.m. Gaurav had already gone to bed. I used to handle all the household chores alone, which kept me very busy. When my husband returned from work in the evening, I couldn't give him much time because my sister-in-law would not step out of her room after 5 p.m. and would call me even for the smallest tasks. I used to feel great happiness doing work for my sister-in-law. I had told her that she didn't need to step down from her bed for anything. I would do all her work myself. Hearing this, my sister-in-law was very pleased and gave me her blessings. All I ever wanted were blessings. Soon, a year of my marriage passed, but I still didn't have a child. My sister-in-law was a very virtuous woman. My husband used to say, "Take blessings from my sister-in-law and ask her to pray for you. God listens to her prayers very quickly. So, you should keep seeking her blessings." Even our neighbors held her in high regard. Whenever anyone's child fell ill, they would bring them to my sister-in-law to seek her blessings. My husband also insisted that if I wanted to keep him happy, I must keep his sister-in-law happy and always take care of her. Because of this, I was trying to manage everything nicely. However, amidst all this, my relationship with my sister-in-law had started to wither. Then one day, something happened that shook me to the core, leaving me astonished, and it also revealed the biggest truth about the person I despised the most in this world. Every night, I used to massage my sister-in-law's feet. One night, after massaging her feet, it was already 11 p.m. For some time, I had been suffering from insomnia, so I had started taking sleeping pills to fall asleep. When I picked up the box containing my medicines, I was shocked to find that my sleeping pills were missing. They had run out, and since it was late at night, I couldn't arrange more. I was wide awake and wondered how I would endure such a long night. My husband was already asleep. I hesitantly tried to wake him, but there was no response. He seemed to be in a deep sleep, snoring loudly. Exhausted from the day's work, I lay down, hoping fatigue would eventually make me fall asleep without the pills. But by 3 a.m., my back ached from lying down, and I was still awake. Frustrated, I got up. Bored, I thought of visiting my sister-in-law's room to pass the time. She often mentioned that she barely slept at night and stayed awake. I decided to sit with her. My sister-in-law had a small temple in her room where she would always sit and pray. As I walked towards her room, I suddenly heard a man's voice coming from inside. Hearing this, my steps froze. How could there be a man's voice coming from her room? I thought I might be imagining it, so I moved closer. That's when I distinctly heard the man mention my sister-in-law's name. Now, I was certain the voice was coming from her room. Strangely, I felt an unusual sense of relief. For some reason, my heart felt at ease. I quietly returned to my room and woke up my husband, Gaurav, in panic. He woke up startled, and I told him, "Wake up quickly! There's a man's voice coming from your sister-in-law's room. She has surely called her lover over, and that too at this hour of the night. What's the meaning of a man coming here at this time?" My husband got angry and said, "Sunita, I'll rip your tongue out if you accuse my sister-in-law, who is like a mother to me, of anything wrong. Think carefully before saying anything against her. I grabbed his hand and insisted, just come with me once and see everything with your own eyes. Furious, he glared at me, but followed me out of the room. I rushed to my sister-in-law's room and suddenly flung the door open, not giving her any chance to react. To our surprise, we saw my sister-in-law sitting in front of the idol, with her hands folded, immersed in prayer. When she turned and saw us, she looked at us with questioning eyes. I panicked and said, I came to ask for a headache pill. I don't have any, so I thought maybe you might have one in your room. Gaurav stood silently in the corner. My sister-in-law called him closer, but he didn't go to her and instead walked out of the room. Meanwhile, I scanned the entire room, wondering where the man could have gone. Suddenly, my sister-in-law, visibly angry, said, Why are you standing here staring at me? You've disrupted my prayer in the middle of the night. Now leave! Her expression scared me. From the very beginning, she had instilled a sense of fear in me. I didn't dare ask her anything, and trembling, returned to my room. As soon as I entered the room, my husband slapped me hard across the face. He started saying, My heart wants to throw you out of this house right now. I told you on the first night of our marriage that you have to take care of my sister-in-law, and if I ever hear anything bad about her from you, I won't spare you. But I'm giving you one last chance. I'm giving you this chance only because you are my sister-in-law's choice. However, after today, if any inappropriate words come out of your mouth, I will divorce you and throw you out of this house. And I will have no regret about divorcing you and throwing you out. Do you understand? I was completely shocked and terrified hearing my husband's words. Gaurav went back to bed to sleep while I sat in the corner of the room, quietly crying. Today, my husband said such a big thing to me because of my sister-in-law. If I had made a mistake, he could have just scolded me. But in anger, he said something so hurtful that I started feeling a lot of anger toward my sister-in-law. Now, I was beginning to hate her. My married life seemed to revolve entirely around her. It was my sister-in-law who had brought Gaurav's marriage proposal to my family. My sister-in-law always wore a big veil, spoke in a very soft tone, and was a very gentle woman. My family liked her a lot. They believed that if my sister-in-law had such good values, then her family must also have good values, and her brother-in-law would be just as good. Seeing all this, my family agreed to the marriage without thinking much. My family said, Your in-laws don't have a mother-in-law, father-in-law, or sister-in-law. Just one sister-in-law who is such a good and cultured woman. She spends her entire day in prayers. Even if you serve her meals while she's sitting on the bed, it would still be less. She's such a good person, never hurt her feelings. Always respect her as your mother-in-law. She has endured a lot of pain in her life. She became a widow early in her marriage and has been taking care of her brother-in-law ever since. So, take good care of her. I understood my parents' words very well. On the first night of our marriage, my husband told me the same thing. Always take care of my sister-in-law. She is like a mother to me. If you keep her happy, only then will I be happy with you. Every word Gaurav said was etched in my mind. Since then, I always took care of my sister-in-law, served her, and considered her my everything. Gaurav used to praise me a lot, but in the evenings, when he returned from the office, he would spend hours in his sister-in-law's room. The next day, the same thing happened. When Gaurav came home in the evening, he went to his sister-in-law's room and stayed there for almost 2 hours. When he came out, he seemed very angry. He started taking out his anger on me over trivial matters. When I asked him the reason, he said, Maybe you've forgotten all the things I told you on the first night of our marriage. I told you to take care of my sister-in-law, but you're so careless. Hearing this, my heart broke. I started crying a lot. I couldn't figure out what I had done to upset my sister-in-law. I was afraid Gaurav might get angry with me. I started serving my sister-in-law day and night again. By God's grace, my husband was impressed with me once more, and everything became normal again. One day, I insisted my husband take me out for dinner. Since our wedding, we hadn't gone out anywhere, even though it had been 1.5 years since our marriage. We were very happy in our lives. That evening, When Gaurav returned from the office, I was all dressed up and waiting for him. I had dressed up beautifully, wearing a black sari, and I looked very attractive. As soon as he came home, he freshened up, and then we went out for dinner. He took me to the biggest restaurant in the city. It felt so good there. We enjoyed ourselves a lot, and I didn't feel like going back home. Gaurav promised me that he would often take me out from now on, but I wasn't sure if he would ever keep his promise, because this time, too, he had come out only at my insistence. It was 11 p.m. when we returned home. As soon as we entered the house, we were shocked to see what was happening inside. Parul's sister-in-law was sitting in the courtyard, holding a photo of her late husband in both hands, crying loudly. She was looking at her husband's picture and saying, "Ever since you left, even Gaurav has changed." She kept crying loudly. Gaurav looked at me with a bewildered expression. Gaurav apologized by touching her feet, which finally calmed her anger a bit, but Gaurav's anger had grown even more. He angrily asked me, "Why are you always after my sister-in-law? And why do you treat her so badly behind my back? She keeps complaining about you to me all the time." I was shocked to hear this because I had never mistreated her. On the contrary, I was always busy taking care of her day and night. I tried to assure my husband that I had never done anything wrong to her, but he refused to believe me. Then I placed my hand on his head, swearing to him, and tried to convince him that I always took good care of his sister-in-law. At that moment, it felt as though convincing my husband was the hardest task of my life because he was unwilling to listen to anything I said. Despite all my efforts, my sister-in-law had been complaining about me to my husband, even though I had always served her with utmost care. Now, as life has moved forward, I've realized that when we do good for someone, we often receive negativity in return at first. We can overcome major challenges in life, but earning someone's trust is a much greater task. It wasn't until I heard a man's voice coming from my sister-in-law's room that I realized I had to expose the truth about this woman. I had never felt this way before, but now I began to despise her. She had already cast a shadow over my married life. Gaurav was constantly preoccupied with his sister-in-law, while I had been reduced to a servant for him and his household. I had made up my mind to uncover the reality of my sister-in-law and open my husband's eyes to the truth. I wiped my tears and lay down to sleep. The next morning, when my husband woke up to leave for work, his mood had returned to normal. I also maintained a calm demeanor and got busy with my daily routine. Suddenly, my sister-in-law approached me, glaring at me, and asked, "What were you doing in my room the night before last?" Looking her straight in the eye, I replied, "Last night, I heard a man's voice coming from your room. I got really worried, thinking a thief might have broken into the house, so I brought Gaurav along with me to check." She retorted, "Don't you have any shame, spying on someone's room like that?" "I was in my room, so who could possibly come in? It seems like your mind is filled with thieves. How will I get rid of this thief in your heart? But I know one way. I'll get Gaurav to divorce you and kick you out of this house once and for all. If I tell Gaurav, he will hand you divorce papers without a second thought and throw you out of this house." Her threats of divorce left me shaken and scared, so I didn't say anything and remained silent. Like every other night, after finishing all my chores, I went back to my room. Gaurav had already fallen asleep. I lay down as well, but my ears were still tuned to any sounds from outside. Every small noise made me jump. At around 2 a.m., I gathered my courage, quietly got out of bed, and tiptoed out of my room, making sure Gaurav wouldn't notice me heading towards my sister-in-law's room. Otherwise, he would be even angrier with me than before. Slowly, I made my way to her room and pressed my ear against the window. She was talking to someone and said, "I'm barely making it through my days. I'm always waiting for the night so I can meet you." Then I heard a man's voice saying, "Parul, I feel the same way. I wish we could be together." That was all I needed to hear. I returned to my room because my suspicions were now confirmed. My sister-in-law's character was indeed questionable. She wasn't the virtuous woman she pretended to be. Now, I was determined to reveal her true face to my husband. But this seemed like the most difficult task in the world, because Gaurav trusted his sister-in-law blindly. He saw her as a mother figure and believed her age alone made her incapable of wrongdoing. The next morning, Gaurav's face still bore the marks of his sour mood. He was short-tempered with me and kept showing his anger over trivial matters. I tried my best to pacify him, and eventually he calmed down but couldn't resist complaining. When I apologized to him and tried to smooth things over, he said, "If you ever use another disrespectful word about my sister-in-law, I won't tolerate it. In my anger, I'll divorce you and kick you out of the house. Then we'll both be left with nothing but regret." "Why don't you understand what I'm saying?" His words left me feeling distressed, but I diverted his attention to something else, coaxing him a little. I said, "Gaurav, let's go out somewhere today." "Anyway, we've scheduled a doctor's appointment. Today, I had to visit the doctor for a checkup. It had been a year and a half since my marriage, but I still didn't have a child. That's why I had decided to start my treatment. A few days ago, the doctor had also conducted some tests, and the reports were supposed to arrive today. Gaurav, my husband, agreed to the idea and said, "All right, I'll come home early in the evening. Be ready." In the evening, I got dressed up and waited for him to return. As soon as Gaurav came home, we left for the doctor's clinic. The doctor looked at both of us carefully and asked, "Why are you undergoing treatment for a child when you both don't even want one? If you both are not stopping a pregnancy, why are you taking medications to prevent it?" I was stunned to hear this. I asked the doctor, "What are you trying to say?" The doctor replied, "Your reports show that neither of you wants to prevent pregnancy, yet you are using medications." This left me completely shocked. How could this be possible? Both of us were devastated. I looked at my husband suspiciously, while he, in turn, suspected me. After that, we started heading home without speaking a word to each other throughout the journey. As we reached our lane, Gaurav's bike ran out of fuel. Frustrated, we began walking home. Upon arriving, I noticed that the door of our house was left unlocked. As we entered, we heard voices coming from my sister-in-law's room. We stopped in the courtyard and tried to listen. My sister-in-law was saying, "Hurry up, I've packed all my belongings. Today, I will leave this house forever." Then, a man's voice responded, "Yes, Parul, let's leave before your brother-in-law and his wife return." My husband, Gaurav, was listening to everything too, and his face turned red with anger. He immediately barged into my sister-in-law's room. When we entered, we saw not only my sister-in-law, but also a man standing with her. I followed Gaurav into the room. Gaurav grabbed the man by his collar and started beating him badly. He slapped him repeatedly and didn't stop until the man was severely injured. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law kept trying to save the man and pleaded, "Gaurav, please listen to me once. For God's sake, let me explain. He is innocent." But Gaurav, in a fit of rage, slapped his sister-in-law across her face, which left me somewhat satisfied. She had been deceiving us for so long. The man fell onto the sofa, injured, while my sister-in-law began crying profusely. I was shocked to see my husband raise his hand on his own sister-in-law. Parul, my sister-in-law, came to me, joined her hands and begged, "Sunita, please talk to Gaurav. For God's sake, let him hear me out once. Just give me a chance to speak." Even though I was furious with her, I decided to listen to her story for God's sake. I stopped Gaurav, and the man sat injured on the sofa. I asked my sister-in-law, "What do you want to say?" I also told Gaurav to hear her out once. Parul started explaining, "I've been in a relationship with this man for 3 years. After my husband passed away, he proposed to me. His name is Vipul, and he's been in love with me since before I got married. When he found out about my husband's death, he started liking me even more and wanted to marry me. Vipul's sister was married to my brother. Before their marriage, I had caused Vipul's sister a lot of trouble. Vipul is the younger brother of my sister-in-law. I had poisoned her life to such an extent that my brother, influenced by me, used to mistreat her. My sister-in-law was a wise and sensible woman, but I manipulated things so much that I got her divorced from my brother and threw her out of our house. Later, I got married and came to this house. My intention was to rule this house alone, but fate didn't allow it. My husband passed away 8 months after our wedding, and I vowed never to leave this house. However, societal pressure forced me to arrange for Gaurav's marriage. That's when you came into this house. I always complained to Gaurav about you, asking him not to pamper you and falsely accusing you of mistreating me when he wasn't home. I wanted to assert my dominance in this house by belittling you, but Vipul confessed his love for me, and I realized I had been wrong in mistreating his sister. Vipul's sister is now divorced and back at her home, and I deeply regret what I did to her. After my husband's death, I realized Vipul's love for me. I know I was wrong to hurt his sister, but now I want to start over and marry Vipul. Parul continued crying and narrating her story, leaving me speechless. If I had known earlier that Vipul loved me, I would never have treated his sister poorly. I would have happily built a life with Vipul. But when I eventually realized Vipul had feelings for me, I became confused about what to do. I didn't want my truth to come out in front of Gaurav, because he respected me so much. Gaurav listened to me and held me in high regard, so I used the same strategy here that I had used with my brother and sister-in-law. I tried my best to drive you out of this house, hoping you'd leave on your own, but you turned out to be incredibly resilient. My home fell apart because of my mistakes. Ever since Gaurav married you, my resentment toward him grew. I wanted to rule this house alone, but Gaurav loved you so much that I felt my own importance diminishing day by day. Gaurav treated me like a mother, yet I began to hate him. I resolved to win my love at any cost. I wanted to marry Vipul and leave this house with him. I used to mix contraceptive medication in your food to ensure you wouldn't conceive. I thought that if you had a child, Gaurav would love the baby even more and completely ignore me. I couldn't bear to live a life like that. Most widows are often disregarded, but I didn't want to live that way. I wanted to be the mistress of this house, with every decision being made according to my wishes. That's why you haven't gotten pregnant yet. For a long time, Vipul had been asking me to run away with him. Our meetings became more frequent. I would open the window of my room at night, and Vipul would sneak in through it. We'd talk for hours, and eventually we decided to get married. Now I've made up my mind to leave this house with Vipul. Both of us were left utterly shocked. My sister-in-law had spared no effort to ruin my life. I was furious with her. We stood there silently, trying to process everything, when suddenly Vipul spoke up. "Parul, what do you think? That I love you? I've only been pretending to love you. My plan was to lure you away from this house and leave you stranded somewhere on the streets. Don't you think I know how badly you treated my sister? Because of you, my sister is now divorced and living at home, crying tears of blood every single day. Seeing her suffer fills me with rage toward you. That's why I pretended to love you and trapped you in my web of lies. I know you're a greedy woman who wants to dominate every household you're in. You ruined your brother's life, and now you were trying to destroy your brother-in-law's life too. I decided to take revenge on you in the same way. My plan was to leave you in disgrace so that the whole neighborhood would shame you. Only then would you understand the pain of being betrayed. Just as you humiliated my sister, I wanted to humiliate you in front of everyone. But before I could execute my plan fully, the truth came out in front of these two. Do you think I ever wanted to marry you? That's your biggest misconception. I only wanted revenge, which is why I pretended to love you and kept coming here to meet you. I could never marry someone like you. A woman who doesn't let others' homes thrive will never have her own home." After saying this, Vipul turned and walked away. Parul ran after him to the gate, crying and begging him, "Please take me with you. You've betrayed me so badly. Forgive me for everything I did to your sister, but please accept me." But Vipul didn't listen to her. He shoved her away and left. After that, Gaurav grabbed Parul's hand, dragged her to her room, and locked her inside. He was shocked to learn that the woman he had treated like a mother was poisoning his life. 3 days after this incident, my husband decided to get Parul married to a 50-year-old man. Parul was unwilling to marry him, but Gaurav made it clear. "Now that my brother is no longer in this world, You have no right to this house or this property. You can no longer stay here. I won't leave you to wander on the streets because you're a woman, and I still respect that. If you marry this man, your life will settle down. Otherwise, I'll throw you out of this house. You have no one of your own. I know that very well. That's why I don't want to leave you to suffer. It's better for you to quietly marry him and start a new life." Finally, Parul gave in and agreed to the marriage. She quietly married the man and left. During her farewell, Gaurav told her, "From today onwards, whatever relationship we had is over. Go and build your new life. It's for your own good. If you ever return to this house, I won't let you stay here because there's nothing left for you in this house. The doors of this house are forever closed for you." Parul left crying with her new husband. After she was gone, my husband folded his hands in front of me and apologized. I forgave him, and now I am very happy with him. A little while later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. All ties with Parul were severed, and now I live a joyful life with my in-laws. My life is full of happiness, and my husband loves me deeply. People reap what they sow, and that's exactly what happened with Parul. Vipul only wanted revenge, and once he succeeded, he abandoned her. Perhaps she's happy now in her life, but what she did was utterly wrong. Friends, I hope you liked my story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and press the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content.